Hello, my name is Eric, and what I do on my channel is I take a philosophical and analytical look at things. I got a little tired of all the ideology and bias that just seems to be everywhere nowadays and decided I wanted to be a little more good faith and look at things with a cooler head. So that's what we're doing today. And in fact, I was sort of inspired to make this video after a comment from one of my previous videos. You can check it out. It's a reaction video where I am reacting to someone else's review of Jed McKenna's books. Jed McKenna is a favorite author of mine. Well, the comment I got, and I'm going to pull it up here, is from one Das Einen, which thank you for your feedback. I love receiving thoughtful comments like this. And it's this first sentence up top that's very interesting to me. And he says, "It seems like you went off the tracks in the first minute. Non-duality is not really a philosophy, or to the extent that it is, it's not true." And I have to say that's not incorrect. That's actually the case. Non-duality is about looking at things for just as they are. And to the extent that you bring your ideas into it, that you start bringing abstractions into it, well, now you are looking at a map. You are no longer looking at the territory. So, Das Einen, you are not incorrect. I agree. However, as I did reply in that thread, sometimes maps do actually point to territory. Sometimes fingers actually do point to moons. There can be all kinds of problems with the process of fingers pointing at moons. For instance, people a lot of times have a bad habit of wanting to just focus on the finger and not actually look at what it's pointing at. That's very common. Another is people will point at the moon and call it something else. That's not as common, but it does happen. And a third option, a lot of times, and this one's probably more common than the second, is that people will point at something other than the moon and call it the moon. You know, that they'll misidentify the thing that they're pointing at. They want to point at this thing, but they wind up pointing at something else. Happens all the time. So what I want to do here today is I want to talk about a concept called levels of abstraction. And the levels of abstraction, let me pull these up now. That's the Reddit thread. Let's try this. So these are the levels of abstraction. Now, there's a lot of arguments in, say, public discourse about what words mean. A sort of popular argument nowadays seems to be over the word woman. On one side, you have folks who believe that words mean anything the individual wants them to mean. And the other side believes that words mean specific things, and if they didn't, then communication couldn't take place. Now, I touched on a little bit of this issue in another video of mine that was titled Why the Right and the Left Are Both Wrong About Gender. I'm not going to review a ton of the content from that video, but I'm going to bring in some of the lessons here because it's illustrative. So the side that believes that words mean specific things, which generally tends to be the right, is correct that if words didn't have at least some meaning that was shared among all of us, then we couldn't really do language at all. Language wouldn't mean anything. We have to agree on certain definitions for words. But at the same time, they are a little bit wrong because they try to insist that words mean something very specific, but that's not always the case. Language is very fluid. Language is undergoing constant change. Now, the other side, which tends to be the left, is correct that language is fluid, and that language is socially constructed, which is just another way of saying that it's socially agreed upon. We have all agreed what the word elephant means, at least, in a loose sense. But they're wrong when they turn to insisting that language is something individually constructed, and that words can now just mean whatever you want them to mean, what each individual decides that they mean. It can't happen that way, because if words don't have a shared meaning, then language is not, the communication is not really taking place. So the correct answer to this problem, the correct answer to this conundrum, is to say that words have a range of meaning. It's not that they have one meaning, it's a range. For example, I can point at a baseball, I can point at a football, and I can point at a snowball. And in every case, I point to these and I say ball. And that makes sense, right? Because the word ball has a range of meaning. I mean, a football, a baseball, and a snowball are three different things, but the word ball applies to these things. However, I can't really point at, say, a cereal box or my wrist and say ball. That doesn't make sense. It's the word ball is outside the range, or pointing at a cereal box on my wrist is outside the range of meaning for the word ball. Now, sometimes words fall close to the line. Like, um, or we might have an instance where, or a context where the meaning of something falls close to the line, close to the edge of the range of meaning of a word. And yeah, that's where we might start getting disagreements. So I'm actually pretty satisfied with this explanation to this problem that we see in a lot of popular discourse. But today I want to go a little deeper with this, and I want to actually explain why we have disagreements like this in the first place. And to do so, I'm going to take a concept that I first ran into from Jean Baudrillard. I think that's how you pronounce it. Again, it's one of these, I've only read Jean Baudrillard's name, and so I'm kind of hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly. But Jean Baudrillard was a 20th century French philosopher, and he came up with this sort of idea that I'm calling levels of abstraction. Now, American audiences are going to be familiar with the 1999 film The Matrix, maybe some others too, but most Americans are familiar with The Matrix. Now, in the opening scene of this movie, the main character, an infamous hacker Neo, pulls a floppy disk. It's been a long time since we used those, but he pulls a floppy disk from a hollowed out book. Now, the book he pulls that disk from is Simulacra and Simulation, which is a book written by Jean Baudrillard. So whether Baudrillard was the first to come up with the idea of levels of abstraction, I don't really know. And to be honest, I forget a lot of the details of the book, so don't take what I am giving you here as a replication of Baudrillard. I'm just kind of taking the general idea that he came up with and maybe adding my own interpretation to it. So now Baudrillard, like, a big thrust of his philosophy is that he noticed that modern day people tend to live a very strange existence. In the past, when the people would work the fields or hunt for a living, or even just do factory work with their hands, people's way of life was strongly tied to their direct experience here in the now. In contrast, by the time Baudrillard was writing his books, I believe Simulacra and Simulation was written in the 80s, I want to say 1981, people's way of life depended far more on navigating concepts that were not as tied to direct experience. You could say that for most of us, it's more important to understand differing opinions about a very abstract concept like justice than it is to know how to hammer in a nail. I mean, the exception is going to be people whose literal jobs involve hammering in nails. But for most of us, as Baudrillard noticed, navigating very abstract concepts like justice is probably a more important skill in the modern world than these skills of the past, which were much more tied to direct experience. So from there, Baudrillard took this into criticisms of how modern society is working in the media and other such directions. Now, I want to note, because if people know anything about the background of Jean Baudrillard, they'll know that he had very strong political views. And if the term leftist would apply to anyone, it's definitely Baudrillard. But I want to make clear that I'm not here to support or oppose his politics. That has nothing to do with what I want to do here. I just want to talk about levels of abstraction because it's very useful no matter what your political persuasions are. So the basic idea behind these levels is that language operates on ascending levels of abstraction. Each level is further from direct experience than the level that is previous to it. And the further we get from direct experience, as a general rule, the more likely we are to have disagreements and the harder they are to resolve. So it's typically very easy to resolve a disagreement over a statement like, the football is in the shed, because I can just take you out to the shed and we can see for ourselves. Problem solved. But disagreements over what counts as like justice, or how we ought to solve the trolley problem, which is a famous philosophical problem, Like these involve a lot of abstraction, and so they're not quite as easy to resolve. I can't just show you an act of justice and now you have a clear idea of what justice means in all cases. I can't just show you an example of morality and now you know what morality means in all cases, or immorality for that matter. What complicates things even more is that the higher you go up the levels, the more meaningful people tend to treat things. Like no one really gets animated over whether a football is brown or white. Actually, some people do. There's probably better examples of this. Perhaps no one would really argue over, the color of my hair, whether it's, dark brown or light brown. It's not the kind of thing people are very attached to. But people certainly get very animated over their ideas of justice or morality or, what makes a show entertaining. And these are very abstract conversations to have. So I'm going to start with the 0th level. And the 0th level is sort of my addition to this, and I think it's the most important level. I would say it's the one that's the most interesting. And as I produce more content, I'm going to be talking about this level probably quite a bit. Even if I don't refer to it by name, I'll be referring to it loosely as direct experience itself. I would also say the 0th level is the only level we can even really regard as true. And because it is the level of direct experience, it's the level of saying, like taking an object, and if I just hold this object up and say this color, or no, it's not even language at all. Like the first level is going to be putting a label on the direct experiences. But if I hold it up and you just look at it without words, that's the 0th level, the level of direct experience. So another example might be like if I point to a tree and you just look at the tree without words, don't label it, just look at the colors, or maybe feel the roughness of the bark without labels. We're not even labeling it roughness, just the actual feeling, the direct feeling itself. That's the 0th level. It's literal experience. However that experience shows up. I would say that this is sort of the level that, like, if you go to a Zen Roshi, this is the level they're probably going to try to get you to operate a little more on. I think it's worth mentioning that meditation as a whole is really about operating on this level. Now, there are some meditation techniques that stretch into the first level, and I'll tell you what that is in just a second here, because it's kind of a gateway to looking at the present moment much more directly, just as it is. Here it is. Now, the important part here is that there's no language or conceptualization happening on this level at all, which is why I'm labeling it at the 0th level. It's just direct experience, sans labels, sans maps. It is the territory. Here it is. Now let's move on to the first level. So the first level is composed of thoughts and language about that direct experience itself. It's the most direct labeling. So holding this up again, red. Or let's say a bee was flying around. I might say buzzing. This is first level language. If I get stabbed in the foot, I might say pain or ow. And that's first level language. First level language is very direct. It's concrete, non-abstract language that simply labels a very direct perception. Okay, now let's go on to the second level, and I'm gonna say a word about differentiating the first and second levels here in a minute, but I'm just gonna tell you what the second level is first. The second level is the first level that we actually have abstractions themselves and not just direct labels like on the first level. And albeit these abstractions are very simple ones. Second level language refers to abstractions about direct experience. So I might hold this up and say cylinder, or even water bottle. In both of these cases, cylinder and water bottle for this object are both second level language. Now, the concept of a cylinder is an abstraction. It's an abstraction about the shape of this object right here. The identity of this object as a water bottle is also a second level language. It's a very simple abstraction about what this is. Another example might be the sentence, there are 3 baseballs here. This sentence contains 2 second level abstractions. The number 3 is a second level abstraction. I'm assuming, by the way, that if there was 3 baseballs sitting in front of me, I don't have 3 baseballs here, but imagine there were 3 baseballs sitting in front of me. This would be a second level abstraction, because you would have two such abstractions, in that the number 3 is describing this collection in front of me. And it is an abstraction because I'm kind of drawing an imaginary line around the 3 baseballs. If they were here, I would have to like sort of mentally, unconsciously draw a sort of boundary around them in order to say, I'm essentially saying within this imaginary boundary, there's 3 of this object I identify as a baseball. You get it? Now, it might seem confusing that something like baseball or water bottle is a second level abstraction, is a second level of language rather than the first level. You may ponder, well, aren't I just labeling a direct perception when I label this a cylinder or I label this a water bottle? Well, no, not quite. If you point at the baseball and say white, that's a first level abstraction, or point at this and say red, you're clearly using first level language. If I hit the ball with a bat and say, crackle, or something like that, then that's also first level language. However, identifying the object as a water bottle or baseball takes more than this. Your mind has to synthesize several raw perceptions together. Like I have to synthesize, the shape of this, and I'm also looking at the the water that's contained within, and I'm looking at this, the top here. I have to put all of these things together, and I'm drawing this sort of imaginary boundary around it. I have to synthesize all these individual raw perceptions together in order to call this a water bottle. I don't have to do that when I'm pointing at it and saying red. There's no combining. There's no synthesis of several different, because I could like this is a separate object really than this. But when I look at it and label it, I'm putting the whole thing together. I don't have to do that when I use the label red. This is the difference between first and second level language. In fact, I would say this is the primary difference. First level language does not require synthesis, whereas second level language does. It requires drawing imaginary boundaries. It requires the Kantian category of object. The first level is just labeling raw, uncognized perception. Well, the second level is synthesizing. So another difference is that all abstractions from the second level on are imposed upon direct perceptions, and this is an incredibly important point. And once you recognize your mind doing this, it becomes it's such a big deal. So many people don't understand this. like green is something that's imposed upon us, or red is something that's imposed upon us, and then it's just simply labeled. But to call an object a water bottle, I have to impose the concept onto the thing that I'm experiencing. Now, cognitive scientists call this top-down processing. We take a previously formed mental framework into the experience of what a water bottle is, and then impose that framework onto the experience. And cognitive scientists call these frameworks schemas. And this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing when we label an object, a water bottle or a baseball. It's not really what we're doing when we label a direct experience like red or buzzing or pain. It takes additional stimuli or additional concepts to synthesize these direct experiences together in order to impose this mental framework on them. And now lastly, another way to tell the difference is that second level often assumes context, whereas the first level does not. If I say there are 4 children in the room, I'm using second level language because there's some implied context where there are 4 children, in the room. I'm certainly not talking about my town, because in my town, like the city I live, there are certainly more than 4 children. I might not even be talking about the room I'm in. I mean, in this case, I'm not, because I'm here alone. But if I was, say, in a classroom, there might be 4 children present. So uh, the context, but the context obviously in any case is going to be likely, if you utter this. I mean, of course, not right here in this moment, but if you would normally utter such a context, it's likely that these children are likely standing in front of the speaker. So, in any case, the point of second level language, or a good way to differentiate it from first level language, is that second level language often assumes a context, whereas first level language, like this is red, doesn't really assume a context. Red is just red wherever you perceive it. All right, so let's talk about the third level, and this is where things actually start getting rather abstract. And it's also the level that usually science and mathematics usually operate on. So identity labels are a second level experience. Water bottle or baseball. These identity labels, generally speaking, brook very little disagreement, except in like highly philosophical or perhaps legal discussions. Those are usually the only contexts that we start getting disputes. But at the third level, we start seeing some actual disputes. This is where people start disagreeing. Now, the third level consists uh, of abstractions and generalizations about second level abstractions. Okay, so I mean, forgive all the numbers here, but it's accurate to say that the third level is all about second order abstractions. Take, for example, the concept of number. The statement "there are 4 children here" is a second level statement, as is there are 3 baseballs. But now we can take the concept of numbers in general and start making statements about them. So an example would be something like 3 plus 4 equals 7, or 3 is a prime number. We can also do this with shapes. My water bottle here, or say a spice container, all have a roughly cylindrical shape. That's a second level statement to say this is cylindrical in shape. But now, if you take the abstraction of a cylinder and start making statements about it, for example, the volume of a cylinder is pi times the radius squared times the height of the cylinder, then I'm making a third level statement. If, as you can see, we took a second level abstraction of cylinder, and now we started generalizing over all cylinders. That's where you start to get third level language. Now, it's not just mathematics that uses third level abstractions. Something like "the cat is lying on the mat" is a second level statement, uh, whereas "all cats are mammals" is now a third level statement. It's a third level abstraction. So what's interesting about third level statements is that they're getting rather far from direct experience. They're very much tethered in abstractions, albeit quite simple second level ones. You might think, well, disagreements here are easy to resolve. No one really disputes that all cats are mammals or what the volume of the cylinder is. Sure, but how about something like "pit bulls are aggressive"? Well, this is a third level statement. I'm abstract, like saying that dog is a pit bull is a second level abstraction, but saying all pit bulls are aggressive, or pit bulls are generally aggressive, these are third level statements because I'm now abstracting over the set of all pit bulls. So it's a third level. I would say that this is a sort of contentious, third level statement, whether pit bulls are aggressive. Some people might say, well, they are. That's why a lot of neighborhoods or cities ban pit bulls. But people that are dog owners will know that a lot of dog aggression, if not all dog aggression, is really to blame on the owner of the dog. So it's definitely the case that people do start having disagreements over these third level statements. The problem with the third level is it's the first time that we can't just go out into the world and show someone, or not always. Like sometimes we can. Like if we make a third level statement like all swans are white, well, we can go out into the world and we can disprove such a statement. But that's not always the case. It's not always the case that we could just go and show someone something like all pit bulls are aggressive, or even most pit bulls are aggressive, is that's really hard to show someone that that's true by just going out into the world and showing. So it's already starting to get rather divorced from direct experience. Usually on this level, you have to do things like define terms, make use of logic. Can you see how it's different to say to prove to someone that dog is a pit bull versus pit bulls are generally aggressive? Like it is two very different statements. It's harder to prove pit bulls are aggressive than that dog is a pit bull. Okay, so now let's go to the fourth level, and this is where things get truly wild. If the second level is about first order language, and the third level is about second order language, well, it's fair to say that the fourth level is about nth level abstractions. It's not just third; it can be about third, but it can also be about fourth and presumably higher order abstractions. It's nth level abstractions. You can almost call this the nth level, maybe, instead of the fourth level. It's abstractions that are built on other abstractions that are built on other abstractions. Basically, at the fourth level, we are now just divorced from direct experience totally. We're using abstract concepts that are wholly defined in terms of other abstractions. Their grounding in direct perceptions is it's somewhere between tenuous and non-existent. And I have used already in this, early in the video, a great example of a fourth level concept, which is justice. There's no way to define this term except in reference to other third or fourth level abstractions, and like third level at best. That's like the best you're going to do when you're trying to define a term like justice. And worse yet, we're more likely to simply resign ourselves to using yet more fourth level abstractions in order to define this concept. Perhaps we could talk about how the concept of justice may have developed in human societies because of the need to, say, stop all sorts of unpleasantness, like criminal activity. For example, the term "I dislike this" is a second level statement. But this isn't really defining the term so much as just giving a history of it. Saying that like theft is something that's very unpleasant, and therefore we need to it's justice to stop theft, or that more accurately, what I'm trying to say here is that saying that we came up with this concept in order to prevent things like theft, to prevent that sort of unpleasantness from occurring, or at least give us a way to deal with that sort of unpleasantness. That's not really defining the term. That's just giving a history of the term. Okay, so it's not quite the same. Actually, defining the term justice cannot adequately be done except in reference to other fourth level concepts, or at best third level concepts. Go on and give it a try if you disagree with me. Since the references that fourth level concepts use are all third and fourth level themselves, any disputes over the use of these concepts cannot be resolved by reference to direct experience at all. The third level problem of having to define terms and then use logic to synthesize these terms is amplified like exponentially on this level. At least with third level statements like all cats are mammals, my terms can be defined with some reference to direct experience. I can define what a cat is in terms of what we can observe about cats, their physiology, behaviors, and the like. But with fourth level concepts, I don't even have that to fall back on. There is no biology of justice that I can give that has reference to some direct experience. Like maybe something like if we say Batman acts in the name of justice, we only have the most abstract, vague tethers to direct experience to define what we mean by that. What's really weird about these fourth level statements is that, like, more often than not, our agreement is contingent upon just simply agreeing about these terms without needing to refer to direct experience. We tend to say something like Batman acts in the name of justice because, well, that's just what we agree Batman does. That's what we just agreed. That's who Batman is. The arbitrariness of fourth level concepts can make for some really weird and confusing uses of language too. Like, earlier I said I like this or I dislike this as a second level statement because you're referring to a direct experience of liking or disliking, like pain or displeasure or that, like, these are very direct experiences to us. But it gets a little tricky when you consider a statement like I like freedom of speech. uh, because understanding what I'm about to say is like extremely useful because you can accurately suss out what people are really saying, even though they themselves are not really conscious of it. If you're aware of this, I like freedom of speech really actually means I didn't like it when I said something, and then you responded by saying you can't say that or you're not allowed to say that. That's what it really means to say I like freedom of speech. On the surface, freedom of speech is a fourth level concept. But because fourth level concepts are so untethered from direct experience and have such wide ranges of meaning, people quite often use fourth level words as substitutes for second level experiences or third level generalizations. This is why if someone says, I like freedom of speech because I don't like it when you tell me what I can and can't say, you often get someone else that comes in and says, well, that's not what freedom of speech means. It means the government can't prosecute you for what you say. It doesn't mean other people can't tell you what's appropriate or not. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Like, the first person is using this term as a stand-in for one or more second level experiences that they've had. I didn't like it when you told me what's appropriate or inappropriate, but the latter person is trying to define it on this fourth level of it's something that the government's not allowed to prosecute you for. So Baudrillard's original concerns, I think, were mostly about the fourth level. Unlike the second level, where we can just show someone, or the third level, where at least we can define our terms or define our words in terms of direct experience, we only have these loose agreements and precedents at best to refer to these fourth level ideas. And the problem is our lives are more and more, as time goes on, increasingly submerged in these fourth level concepts that are very vaguely and loosely defined. He paid special attention to it in the media and how the media manufactures a narrative using fourth level concepts. And boy, I think the age of the internet is finally really exposing how this works. I think many people like it's becoming part of popular consciousness to see how much the media manufactures a narrative, because we're becoming more and more aware of ourselves being in our own little bubbles of left wing or right wing or whatever wing you want to say. So more and more people are becoming aware of the narrative manufacture. I think one of the best ways to see this in action is to watch a professional wrestling broadcast. They'll say things like Stone Cold is the toughest SOB in the WWF. And yes, I'm sort of dating myself here. Back in my day, Stone Cold was the biggest wrestler, and it was called the WWF instead of the WWE nowadays. But I mean, like, how do you even define the toughest SOB? Like, what does that mean? Well, it's a fourth level concept, and they're using it to creatively paint a narrative of Stone Cold being this tough son of a gun. Now, the media does this constantly for matters that we would consider far more serious than who gets to be the WWF champion. So, although I think it's really easy to disagree with some of the conclusions that Baudrillard comes to, I think his observations of how people have become possessed by fourth level concepts and their particular views of those fourth level concepts is incredibly precocious. He's on point. People from all sides of politics, religion, philosophy, and the like, they really fall for this trap. For me personally, I've had just the damnedest time just trying to convince people of the fact that we can't even resolve disagreements on the fourth level in the first place, because the conversation is just completely dependent on how we want to define these ultra vague terms um, that have only the like I said, vaguest empirical or objective source we can refer back to. Only prior disagreement on what our terms mean will create, or I'm sorry, only prior agreement on what our terms mean, like, like I was saying about Batman, we just sort of agree Batman acts in the name of justice, even though he does things that are sometimes outside the law. Uh, Only this sort of prior agreement is how we get to further agreement when it comes to these concepts on the fourth level. So, um, some of my examples here um, may seem a little inaccurate or disputable. This is because philosophy itself, while perhaps discussing subject matter from across the levels of abstraction, is typically itself a fourth level exercise. There's tons of terms being used here that are extremely abstract, and I don't really see a way around it. I do my best to maybe lower the level of abstraction at times, and philosophers in general, I think, endeavor to do this, um, but it's not always possible. Now, a useful thought that sometimes enters my head is people are always saying something that makes sense, at least in the way that they mean it. In other words, if you listen to people, you could always transform their statement into something that is true. At least it's true as in the way that they are perceiving the world. Um, Ultimately, almost all statements break down into the second level if you try hard enough, which itself breaks down into the first level. You just have to really, really try to transform people's statements in this way in order to find where they're coming from. Now, whether the statement really is second level, third level, fourth level is just about how much you want to dig to bring it to that level. But this is how you can easily understand statements like "I like freedom of speech" quite easily. Typically, people are describing some sort of direct experience that they had, some sort of memory often. Now, there are some statements that are not like this, like all effects have a cause. This is because all language and all thinking already assume many of these statements are true. These are the famous Kantian categories, and there's a lot of philosophical discussion to be had on these sorts of beliefs. But these sorts of beliefs are really interesting to consider on their own, but it's kind of beyond the scope. So I hope you learned something today. I hope I got this idea out there of levels of abstraction. Um, to go back to the original comment here. Nope, that's not it. Apologies. Take a minute here to find the original. There we go. Das einen. Essentially, yeah, I think you are correct because the recognition of non-duality happens on the zeroth level. It's about the direct experience of things. It's about saying red. But I will also say that words and language um, can can point to direct experience. It is possible to put a label on things that is accurate. That like maps can be useful when pointing at a territory. That is the case. So uh, if you guys enjoy this content, if you think I had something useful to say, you want to see more, please subscribe. I'm a new channel. I have a lot to say. I have a whole list of ideas that I want to get out there. So like and subscribe, and thank you for joining me. My name's Eric, and glad to have you.